What the hell happened to Spyro, man? A little purple dragon who redefined a generation of platformers was gone, reignited, but then gone again. Over the years, Spyro has had many faces, from being the face of the PlayStation 1 era to just a nostalgia piece trapped in a piece of plastic. Now, I love Spyro. I grew up with him. I played the originals until the discs literally stopped working. I'd get lost in those worlds, the grasslands of artisans, the peaks of peacekeepers, and the dreamlike purple haze of Midnight Mountain. But over the last 2 decades, Spyro's flame has dimmed quite considerably. He was passed from studio to studio, each trying to reinvent him in their own way, each trying to reinvent him, and each getting further away from what made him special in the first place. This isn't just the story of a dragon, it's the story of a mascot who lost himself. Let's rewind back to 1998. Sony was still figuring out what a mascot was to be. Crash Bandicoot was already holding that title, but Insomniac Games, a small studio, had something very different in mind. They wanted a game that was fast, smooth, and colourful, and also something that pushed what the PS1 could actually do. And unsurprisingly, they nailed it. The original Spyro was pure magic, a semi-open world platformer where every single level flowed into the very next. You could glide from one cliff to the other in the single press of a button, and it felt perfect. The camera, the momentum, the movement, it was all so smooth. And genuinely, it's so easy to forget how advanced this game was for its time. But besides movement and the world, more importantly, Spyro had personality. He was cocky, but likeable. And the dragons that you rescued were quirky and expressive. The world, in general, was vibrant. It was handcrafted rather than being procedurally thrown together like they are nowadays. And the composer Stuart Copeland, yes, the drummer of The Police, they got the drummer of The Police to do the music for this game, which is incredible. It gave the game a jazzy, dreamlike soundtrack that still genuinely holds up today, so I beg you to give it a listen. And then fast forward to 1999, Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage, or Gateway to Glimmer, depending on what country you're in. Ripto's Rage built on the formula that made the original so special, but added new abilities, challenges, and proper characters like Hunter, Elora, and Moneybags. The sequel turned Spyro's world into something alive, and overall was just more of that Spyro goodness that we'd come to know and love. Then it hits the year 2000, and coincidentally, Spyro's next game is titled Spyro Year of the Dragon. The third, and arguably best entry, introduced multiple playable characters and minigames that actually worked with the flow of the game, and didn't feel like a side project. Between 1998 and 2000, Insomniac perfected the trilogy. It wasn't just a great kids game, it was tight and had smart game design. You really had a sense of freedom, but every level had purpose. And that's why Spyro worked. It was fun to control. You didn't need skill trees or upgrade menus or crafting systems. You just glide from one end of the map to the other and have a real sense of wonder. And most praise this era of the series as the best, and that goes for most platformers of the era when they made that jump to PS2. But then, like all studios, Insomniac decided to move on, and they created Ratchet & Clank, and to be honest, that's really where things started to fall apart for the Spyro IP. After Year of the Dragon, Spyro's publishing rights expired. Spyro's world and his future were handed off to Universal Interactive, who gave it to a new developer, Equinox Digital Entertainment, and then later Check 6 Studios. And almost immediately, the magic disappeared. In 2002, Spyro Enter the Dragonfly released. It was the first Spyro game without the touch of Insomniac, and it really showed. That game was so awful. On paper, it looked like a true sequel. Same style world, same mechanics, but under the hood, it was a technical disaster. Frame rates dropped, loading screens were long, bugs were everywhere, and the cutscenes, my gosh, they were awful. Wow! It launched unfinished because it was being rushed to push holiday shelves. Gameplay-wise, technically speaking, it was the same Spyro that you remember, but just slower, chunkier, and less alive. And to be honest, the spark was gone. Get it? Then we fast forward to 2004, where we received Spyro A Hero's Tale. It was developed by Eurocom, and it was better. It was actually decent. A little darker in tone, new worlds, new mechanics, but it really did lack that heart. And the level design leaned more into combat and less into exploration, which is kind of the opposite of what the original trilogy was set out to make. And Spyro had essentially gone from a speed-driven platformer to a small arena fighter with some platforming sections. 100%, this is where the franchise lost its footing. Spyro wasn't bad, but he wasn't Spyro anymore. The fun and energy was all replaced with half-baked reinventions. And to be honest, he really wasn't the face of PlayStation anymore. He was just another mascot from the 90s that couldn't survive the jump to the next generation of consoles. Let's skip forward to 2006. Vivendi Universal decided to hit the reset. They handed the Purple Dragon to Chrome Studios, and they essentially said, make it new and serious. Literally the opposite of what Spyro is. And thus began the Legend of Spyro Trilogy, A New Beginning, The Eternal Night, and Dawn of the Dragon. This was not the Spyro that we knew. Gone were the floating gem worlds, the cheeky dialogue, the vibrant pastel skies that look so beautiful, and instead we got a cinematic dark fantasy reboot with voice acting from Elijah Wood and Gary Oldman of all people. Overall, the tone was heavier, the gameplay was linear, and the focus was entirely on combat. Now I'll say this, for what it is, The Legend of Spyro isn't bad, it's just not the same genre as the originals. It's a hack and slash beat 'em up with light platforming aspects, and the storytelling was surprisingly ambitious for what the series started out as. And no longer was Spyro just a cocky kid. He had a prophecy, he had destiny, and he had lore behind him as well. And the combat was flashy, the bosses were big, and the voice acting gave that whole sense of scale. But it really did kind of come at a cost, because the exploration was gone, and that was one of the main things that people associated with those original titles. And so because of this, Spyro's world was kind of no longer about freedom or gliding through sprawling creative levels, it was just fighting and brawling all the way through a corridor until you get to the end of the level. Still, this trilogy has found its fans. Personally, it's not for me, but it showed that Spyro could evolve, maybe just not into this, because, you know, I want my OG Purple Dragon back. And then came the plastic apocalypse. Oh no, please, do I have to talk about this? I do? Really? Okay, fine. In 2011, Toys for Bob, under Activision, launched Skylanders Spyro's Adventure, a new Toys to Life series that blended real-life figures with digital gameplay. It was a massive hit, like a humongous hit. Every kid wanted figures. I was 10 when it came out, and I would practically beg my parents every time we went to a shop for a new Skylander. The concept was genius, and also a massive moneymaker. You collect toys, put them on a portal, and then they come to life in-game. But here's the thing, despite Spyro's name being on the box, it was never really about him. Spyro was barely in the story. He was just another figure on the shelf. The world wasn't his anymore. It was an ensemble of new characters designed to sell toys. And it's really wild to think about it now. Spyro was the face of a generation turned into a side character in effectively his own franchise. And while Skylanders was undeniably successful, it came at the cost of Spyro's identity. And to be honest, after a few sequels, the fad faded. The Toys to Life bubble had burst. Disney Infinity, Lego Dimensions, Skylanders, they were all gone. And with that, Spyro also disappeared once more. Then out of nowhere in 2018, Toys for Bob brought back Spyro with the Spyro Reignited Trilogy. It wasn't a reboot, it wasn't a reinvention, it was a love letter, very akin to the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, which most likely is the reason why we got Spyro Reignited in the first place. The team at Toys for Bob rebuilt the original trilogy from the ground up, preserving everything that made those games great while modernising the visuals and sound. And the result? One of the most faithful remasters ever made. Every glide, every gem, every sprint, every sheep that you would torch, it all felt exactly the same as I remember, but better. And for a moment, it felt like Spyro was really back. The nostalgia hit so hard and longtime fans were ecstatic, critics praised it, and it sold incredibly well. Toys for Bob had effectively proved that there was still love for this purple little dragon. And by this point you'd think, oh, well maybe they're going to reboot the franchise, but nothing. We got nothing.
It's all there, black and white, clear as crystal. You get nothing. You lose Good day, sir!
Now I'm going to talk about Crash Bandicoot 4 just very briefly because it is very integral to the story of Spyro and its future. So after the Reignited Trilogy, Toys for Bob moved to Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time. It was a fantastic game, it was smart, challenging, funny, and deeply respectful to its original source material. And a lot of people were thinking, okay, you know, Crash got his proper sequel, surely Spyro's next, right? But a sequel never came. Crash Bandicoot 4 didn't perform as well as Activision had hoped. It launched at full price, and within months it hit PlayStation Plus, which effectively tanked its post-launch sales. And despite reviews, it didn't sell like a big AAA sequel, and that, in Activision's eyes, meant, no, you're not going to get another one. So instead of another Spyro adventure, Toys for Bob was quietly folded into supporting roles for Call of Duty projects. The same studio that gave us Reignited and Crash 4 were reduced to live service support. And occasionally there are still whispers, of course, rumours of Spyro 4, hints at prototypes, but it's been so many years since then, and nothing concrete has come out. And effectively that means that the likelihood we will get a new Spyro game is 0 to none. And so looking back, you know, Spyro's story is almost poetic. He's gone through more transformations than most franchises ever do, from open world collectathon to beat 'em up to Toys for Life and a faithful remaster. And yet, surprisingly, a lot of people still care, myself included. Spyro endures because his games weren't just fun, they were comforting. They had rhythm, warmth, a sense of play that a few modern titles barely capture. And the saddest part is that Spyro didn't fail. He had that chance to be Spyro once again with the remaster, but unfortunately circumstances surrounding it just caused it to never happen. Every single new iteration chased trends instead of trusting what worked in the originals, except for the remaster of course. If there's any justice in this world, Toys for Bob will get another shot, because the Reignited Trilogy proved something important, that Spyro still mattered. The people still wanted to glide through colourful worlds, collect gems, and burn sheep for fun. And it's just so sad to say that, effectively, Spyro's flame has gone out. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy, then subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.